He had one button, one night, one decision. The man who saved 8 billion lives, and almost nobody knows his name. On September 26, 1983, one man decided not to end the world. You've probably never heard of him. His name was Stanislav Petrov. He was a Soviet military officer, 44 years old, working a night shift he didn't even want. And at exactly 12:14 a.m., every alarm in his bunker started screaming. The screen in front of him said the United States had just launched a nuclear missile at the Soviet Union. Moments later, it said 2, then 3, then 5. Petrov had one job: report the attack up the chain of command and let the generals decide what happened next. He had about 3 minutes. This is the story of the most important decision in human history, made by a man sitting alone in a dark room, inside a building nobody knew existed, on a night nobody was ever supposed to remember. But before we get to what he did, you need to understand how close the world already was to catastrophe. By 1983, the United States and the Soviet Union possessed roughly 60,000 nuclear warheads between them. To put that into perspective, a single warhead could erase an entire city. They had 60,000. The Cold War operated on a terrifying idea called mutually assured destruction. The logic was brutally simple. If one side launched nuclear weapons, the other side would launch theirs in return, and everyone would die. Therefore, nobody would attack first. Brilliant plan. Very reassuring. Absolutely nothing could go wrong. Except by 1983, things were already going very wrong. Earlier that year, US President Ronald Reagan publicly called the Soviet Union the evil empire. Unsurprisingly, the Soviets did not appreciate that description. Then, just weeks before our story begins, a Soviet fighter jet shot down Korean Airlines flight Oro 7 after it accidentally entered Soviet airspace. 269 people died. The entire world was already balanced on a knife's edge. Both superpowers genuinely believed the other might launch an attack at any moment, which is exactly the worst possible mindset to have when your early warning system suddenly tells you nuclear missiles are on the way. The bunker where Petrov worked wasn't even supposed to exist. Buried underground outside Moscow was a facility known as Serpukhov 15. Its purpose was simple and deeply unsettling. It monitored American missile launches using satellites and provided the Soviet military with early warning if a nuclear attack ever began. The system was called OKO, which means eye in Russian. If American missiles launched, OKO would detect the heat signatures and give Soviet leaders enough warning to launch their own missiles before the incoming weapons arrived. Nobody would win. Everybody would lose. Petrov wasn't even supposed to be there that night. He was covering for another officer. It was just another routine shift. He had done the job hundreds of times before. Nothing ever happened until 12:14 a.m. Suddenly, the coffee cups stopped mattering. One missile detected, launched from the United States, heading toward the Soviet Union. The protocol was crystal clear. Report the attack immediately. Petrov picked up the phone. Then he put it back down because something felt wrong. What happened over this next 4 minutes may be the single most important sequence of decisions in human history. Petrov started thinking. First, if the United States was truly launching a nuclear first strike, the nightmare scenario Soviet commanders had feared for decades. They wouldn't launch one missile. They would launch everything. Second, the OKO satellite system was relatively new. It had glitches. It had bugs. Everyone who worked with it knew that. Third, the separate ground radar network wasn't detecting anything at all. No missiles. No confirmation, nothing. Then the alarms updated. 2 missiles detected. 3, 4, 5. Every protocol said the attack was real. Every alarm said the attack was real. Everyone in that room was staring at him, waiting for him to pick up the phone and tell Soviet leadership that World War III had begun. He had no computer making decisions for him. No colleague to consult. No extra time. Just a feeling. A feeling that something wasn't right. So he made a choice. He reported it as a system malfunction. He was wrong about the protocol. He was right about everything else. The reason the system detected 5 missiles that didn't exist is almost unbelievable. The OKO satellite network contained a flaw. Under extremely specific conditions, a particular angle, a particular time of day, and a particular alignment of the satellites. Sunlight reflecting off high-altitude clouds could fool the sensors into thinking missile launches were occurring. The Soviet Union had spent enormous resources building one of the most sophisticated early warning systems on Earth, and it was fooled by sunshine. 5 false launches, 5 fake missiles. A planetary near-death experience caused by sunlight hitting clouds at exactly the wrong angle. If Petrov had followed protocol and reported the attack as genuine, Soviet commanders would have had only minutes to decide whether to launch a retaliatory strike. Given the extreme tension of 1983, many historians believe they very likely would have. The United States would have detected Soviet launches and responded with its own. Within less than an hour, much of human civilization could have vanished, all because of sunshine. And here's the part that makes the story even harder to believe. You would assume that after saving the world, Stanislav Petrov would be celebrated as a hero. He wasn't. The Soviet military couldn't publicly reward him without admitting that their expensive new warning system had nearly triggered a nuclear war by mistake. So instead of receiving a medal, Petrov was quietly criticized for improper record-keeping during the incident. He was reassigned. Eventually, he retired early. For years, almost nobody knew what had happened. His wife later died of cancer. He lived a quiet life on a modest pension. The man who may have saved billions of people spent his days sitting in a small apartment outside Moscow, while the world carried on, completely unaware of what he had done. The world didn't end on September 26, 1983, but it came frighteningly close. And the reason it survived has nothing to do with governments, weapons, military doctrines, or sophisticated systems. The world survived because one tired man, working a shift he never wanted, trusted his instincts more than a machine. He broke the rules. He questioned the system. And when everyone around him expected him to follow protocol, he chose to think for himself. Years later, recognition finally began to arrive. In 2006, a German organization quietly honored him for his actions. In 2013, he was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. He never won. Stanislav Petrov died in May 2017 at the age of 77. His death went largely unnoticed. In fact, many newspapers didn't report it until months later. The next time someone tells you that one person can't change history, remember the man who sat alone in a secret bunker, looked at a screen screaming that the world was about to end, and decided not to believe it. One man, one decision, 8 billion lives. His name was Stanislav Petrov. And now you know it.